So, what's the historical context of Venezuela's current election system? Its historical context. Well, voting in Venezuela before Chavez came to office, before he became president, was a system that was really riddled with fraud. Most people aren't aware of this. People always talk about Venezuela being one of the oldest democracies in Latin America, and that it hasn't had a dictatorship since 1958 and had free and fair elections and so on for the 40 years before Chavez supposedly ruined the system and so on. Well, actually, in the meantime, most academics more or less agree that it was a flawed, even if they disagree about just how flawed it was, but they agree generally that it was a flawed democracy. And some of the main flaws, really, let me just quickly mention them, was, well, that it was, first of all, the governing parties, and any of you who know Venezuelan history will know this, the governing parties, the main two parties, Acción Democrática and COPE, which were basically the Social Democratic Party and the Christian Democratic Party, they made a pact which came to be known as the Punto Fijo Pact. And basically part of that pact was an agreement to basically share power amongst themselves while keeping out any challengers. And so how did they keep out any challengers to that political system for 40 years? Well, there are a number of different ways, but some of the main ones involved fraud in the electoral process itself. That is, when counting votes, the votes for the smaller parties, which were often of the left, or usually of the left, were simply discarded or actually divvied up more or less 50-50 for the large parties. That is, when they're counting the votes, and Chavez has talked about this in his speeches many times, where he was an electoral observer actually as part of the military, which was in charge of accompanying the process, and so you could see that when they're counting the votes, here's a vote for the Communist Party. Okay, Acción Democrática gets this one, and then when another one came up for the Communist Party, okay, COPE gets this one, and so on. So that way they effectively eliminated any challenges to power for those 40 years. Another way, of course, was to make sure that these parties never got more than a couple votes, was to exclude them from the support, the financial support that parties got. In other words, all the financial support from the state for the voting process, for campaigning, went towards the two main parties. This process of rigging the elections actually reached a particularly outrageous situation in the 1993 vote, when the system was actually more or less falling apart, because for the first time people were really upset with the political system after 20 years of economic decline in 93. They were really looking for some new people, and one of the strongest candidates at the time was the candidate from La Causa R, which is the Radical Cause, which is a leftist party. Meantime, not so leftist, but anyway. Andres Velázquez, who was running under the Causa R, was actually considered to have been the winner by many people, because they found thousands and thousands of ballots in trash bins after the election that would have swung the vote in his favor. But he decided not to challenge it, instead decided to go into a pact with the winner, which was Rafael Caldera, the official winner, that is. And anyway, so the fraudulent and dysfunctional voting system of Venezuela continued until 1999, essentially. Well, 98, I would say. And when Chavez won, by such an overwhelming majority that there was just no way to challenge that or to commit fraud in order to swing the vote in a different direction. The electoral process went through a fundamental change, though, in 1999, when the new constitution was introduced. And I think the most important change probably was the fact that the new constitution set up the electoral commission, or the electoral council that's in charge of organizing the voting process. It became an independent power or independent branch of government. Normally we think of the government as having three branches: the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. Well, in Venezuela there are five branches of government, and one of the new branches is the electoral power. The fifth being something that's called the moral power. I would prefer to call it the prosecutorial power, perhaps, because it includes the Attorney General, the Comptroller General, and the Human Rights Ombudsperson. Anyway, the electoral power essentially became an independent branch of government, which was really an important innovation. It was actually an idea that Simón Bolívar had, it's an important innovation because that way the whole voting process is kept much more independent of the parties that are in charge of government or that are governing the country. One of the things that this means in practice is that the members of the CNE, the National Electoral Council, the CNE, are chosen in a very transparent manner through a open system of a nomination process where candidates are nominated both from civil society and through the National Assembly. They decide in a joint commission on a list of candidates and that are then later selected by the National Assembly. So it's not the president or anything or the governing party. And not only that, the National Assembly has to select the candidates with a 2/3 majority. That's very important, I think. Although, it makes the process very difficult because if no party has a 2/3 majority, and we saw this happen I guess in '94, there was a new process for selecting a National Electoral Council, and because no party had a 2/3 majority, the selection process was really frozen, and the Supreme Court had to step in and say that because the National Assembly failed to fulfill its constitutional obligation of selecting the Electoral Council, the Supreme Court set up the Electoral Council, the CNE. Anyway, that was an exceptional circumstance, and then after the 2000 vote, a new Electoral Council was able to, that is, after the 2005 National Assembly election, a new Electoral Council could be nominated because the opposition did not participate in that election for the National Assembly. Anyway. So the process, I think, is a very solid process that it really involves a tremendous effort on all sides to select a council. Not only that, they cannot be removed that easily. You also need a 2/3 majority to remove anybody, and also you need an indictment from the Supreme Court. So it's a very complicated and difficult process. So this really assures, I think, that the Electoral Council, even if they'd been nominated by the governing party, but if they decide to go against the governing party in some way, to give a vote to the opposition, there's nothing the governing party can do to prevent that, really. So I think that's very important to keep in mind, is the independence of the Electoral Council. So I think it's a tremendous achievement for the 1999 Constitution. Now, the voting process itself, this is something that most people probably don't know, perhaps, just how safe it is. Lots of people have doubts because the opposition has created such a tremendous atmosphere of doubt about the Venezuelan voting process. Even progressives think, oh, it must be flawed in some way, even if Chavez is immensely popular and so on. All the stuff that they're saying about the voting process, there must be some truth to it or something. Well, the fact is, I think, in my opinion, there's really no truth whatsoever to their criticisms. The voting process is, I would say, definitely one of the most secure and transparent systems in the world today. And election observers have said this many times. Even though they found various flaws in it, and their reports are always kind of balanced with criticism and praise, in the end, in the final analysis, they have said, both the EU, the European Union, and the OAS observers have said that this is one of the safest voting systems in the world.